Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all.
Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and today I'm going to be talking about The Sword Defiant. I can never remember this author's name, Gareth Hanrahan. I don't know, for some reason it's really hard for me to pronounce. Hanrahan, Hanrahan, Hanrahan. I dare you to try and say that 3 times fast. So this book was actually a buddy read. I buddy read it with David over at David's Book Reviews. This is not the first buddy read David and I have done together, but I think out of the ones we've done so far, I think this is both our favorite. That's not to say it's my favorite book in the whole world, but I think out of the things that David and I have read together, I like this one the best so far. Just to give a quick setup of this world before we dive in, basically we have an older gentleman, his name is Alf, and he is this like old retired hero kind of guy. Him and his companions are like super famous because they defeated this like old wizard, this Lord Bone, like way in the past, and now he's just kind of living his life, and he's wandering around with this super cool sword, which I'll talk about later. And, you know, he's just kind of doing his own thing, but of course, some new evil is arising, and he has to try and quote-unquote get the team back together. That's really basically all you need to know going into this book. So before I share my thoughts, I'm going to let David share his thoughts, so let's go hear what he has to say.
Hi guys, so recently me and Chris have been buddy reading the Sword Defiant book. Before I get started, I just want to say that I do have a bit of a sore throat, and if I sound a bit weird, then that's the reason why. I can't help it. I'm doing my best, but yeah, it's just one of them things, I suppose. So this book was a real pleasure to get through, actually. It was a real pleasure to buddy read this with Chris, and because this book lasted us so long, it became important to me somehow. This is a grimdark book, but I think it kind of borders on the line of being grimdark and epic fantasy. Because this book is set after the big battle, the big bad has been defeated, and this is the aftermath of all that. What happens after you have defeated the bad guy, saved the world, and rescued the damsel in distress? What happens after that? And this story answers them questions. Like, what happens after Frodo destroyed the Ring of Power? What happens pretty much after that? That's in entire scenario. And because this book isn't heavy in its action and fight scenes, yes, there are fight scenes in this book, but it's not like massive battles and wars. I mean, that's not really what it is all about. It's about the characters and their progression, and eventually another big bad's going to come up, and they've got to overcome it, or someone else has got to overcome it. So there's always another threat willing to come up. So I had a lot of fun reading this book, and I can't wait to get on to book 2, not in a mad rush to do so, but yeah, eventually I'll get to it. So guys, this has been my overall thoughts on the book. So let's just go straight over to Chris right now.
Thanks, David. So, like David said, there's some good stuff going on in here. I think for me, I'll tell you what I liked about this book and what I didn't like about this book. First of all, what I do like is I think the character work is really well done here. If you are someone that is into like really deep, complex characters, you may like this book. Like, this book is technically considered a grim dark fantasy. I don't personally think it's that grim or that dark compared to other stuff that I've read, but it definitely has that kind of tone to it. So especially with Alf, he's kind of that grizzled old guy type thing. But if you like deep, complex characters, I feel like this book really does a lot of character work. So that's like a good thing. But also, because there is so much character work and so much development, it does take a bit away from the plot, I think. So that's kind of one of the things that I quote unquote didn't like. This book is very slow. It is very slow. It's very heavy on like character interactions and kind of like planning, but there's not a lot of action. Considering Alf has this super cool sword that was given to him, well, not given to him, that was taken from an evil wizard, a sword that has a mind of its own. Like, I want to see that in action, and we really don't get to see a lot of it. There is like action at the end, but it takes a long time to get there. Like, this is not a small book. Like, it's a decent, chunky sized fantasy book. So I feel like that takes way too long. So character work, good. It is a bit slow, bad. Again, the sword is really cool because I don't think I've ever read another story where there has been a sentient talking sword. And I really like some of the interactions that the sword has, both with Alf and with other characters as well, because there are other characters that wield the sword at points during the story, which is really cool. Again, I do think they could have gone farther with that. Like, I wanted more of the sword, and we definitely got like a decent chunk, but I just wanted more personally. I loved the sword. The sword is one of my favorite characters in this book, if I'm being honest. The other thing I really like this book is the quote-unquote the B storyline. So the main storyline is Alf and his kind of adventure, but the B storyline is Olva, who is Alf's sister that he hasn't seen or spoken to in like 20 years, basically. And Olva has a son who basically disappears, and she has to go after him. Now, on one hand, we've heard this story a million times before. Woman goes after her son, has to find him, etc., etc. So that's not new, but I do appreciate like a good female character, and this book does have one in Olva. And I think when I think about other, mother type figures, a mother hunting for her son, the most recent one I have to compare to is, I forget the character's name, but from John Gwynn's Shadow of the Gods series, and I really, really loved her. But she was like a warrior mom going after her son. Olva's not a warrior. She's just a woman. She's just a mother. Like, she doesn't have any special skills. She's not a fighter. She's a homemaker. She's just someone who cooks and cleans and cares for her son. But yet she still goes after him and will not give up and goes on this crazy journey trying to find her son. So I really enjoyed her storyline. I might have liked her storyline more than the main one, except the main one did have the sword, so I don't know. So as I mentioned, there is a lot that I liked in this book. Now, this is only the first book in the series, and I'm kind of on the fence about whether I want to continue the series or not. And the biggest reason I'm on the fence is, I guess, the overall plot of the book. Even though I liked Olva's storyline and I liked the sword, there's just some things that happen, especially in the back half of the book, that kind of left me scratching my head a little bit. So for example, there is like this big reveal that happens in the later half of the book. And I feel like that reveal should have been really emotionally impactful, and it should have been shocking, and it should have been one of those like, oh my God type moments. But it's not, because there's absolutely no setup for it at all. There is no setup for it. Or if there was, I missed it. But I did not see or feel that there was any setup for this big reveal that happens. So it kind of left me not caring like what happened in the rest of the book. Like it didn't matter to me all like when things started happening, because I'm like, I don't even really, you're taking a character that you just introduced in the back half of the book. Why should I care about them? I don't know anything about them at all. So that's kind of the biggest thing that quote unquote lost me. However, again, there is some exciting stuff that happens at the end of the book, specifically with Olva, specifically with Alf and his sword. So that kind of makes up for it. but I'm a little on the fence if I want to spend another 500 plus pages with another slow, grimdark fantasy adventure. And I'm usually someone that loves like that deep character stuff, but I just feel like it was a bit slow for me. And sometimes I don't mind a slow read, but for this one, I really felt it. And it could be due to the fact that David and I read this over the course of 2 months instead of 1. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. So I enjoyed reading this book overall, and I definitely enjoyed reading it with David. I just don't know if I would personally want to continue the series, and that's just how I feel. So if you are trying to decide if you want to read this book, if you don't mind slower paced books and you really like, kind of those deep character type studies and you're really into grimdark fantasy, then yeah, I would say give this one a try. If you're someone that likes more kind of like action-packed adventure type stuff, then I would say probably skip this one. There's probably better ones out there for you. So those are all my thoughts on the Sword Defiant. So now I want to know from you, have you read the Sword Defiant? Have you read any other grimdark fantasy? If you have, let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff coming your way soon. All right, everyone, happy reading.